All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock, it's time for John Fuller to do his program, Legally Yours. If you were watching on video, you probably thought it was an exercise show. Because John's hands were going out and going in and going out.
Oh,
Oh, that's kind of funny. John is, of course, an attorney from here in Ocala at the law firm of Fuller and Fuller. The other Fuller is his beautiful wife, Janet, and he is here to answer your questions that might be affecting you, and we will learn from them as we listen to them. The phone number to call is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 622-9622. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Larry. Yeah, it doesn't pay to be talking about how to move furniture when you're on the video.
Well, those who were watching, you couldn't hear you,
yeah,
and you had your arms out and your arms in.
Well,
it looked like an exercise.
May have been watching. if you have a marble top table, don't pick up.
Turn that mic a little bit.
Don't pick up the marble top table from both sides because it's very likely going to collapse in the middle, and that's a big mess.
And it happened to you.
I had that from personal experience. So anyway, that was the discussion, folks. You didn't miss any legal gems. But anyway, good morning, Larry. How you been?
Good. Good morning.
And
how are you?
Good, and good morning to all of our friends who may be listening in. It's a pleasure, as always, to be here. It really kind of is a nice break in the week. I appreciate our listeners. We get great questions, great comment. A lot of things going on in the country that involve a lot of legal issues. They do, of course, have political overtones to it, and we try to stay away from that as much as we can. But sometimes there's an overlap, and I noticed in the paper this morning where they're anticipating a bevy of new laws that address potentially gun control, and that's an area that is going to be there's going to be a huge dialogue about that, and it's a horrible tragedy that happened in Connecticut. But passing laws quickly in response to one tragedy or some tragedies that have happened it is sometimes not the most deliberate way to debate, analyze, and look at the problem. And the article in the paper I was reading said that there's a lot of folks who believe that this is a multifaceted issue and it should not be addressed only from a unilateral position with people who may have an agenda concerning one particular aspect of it. Certainly, it was a tragedy and needs to be examined, but I hope that our elected officials will not do so without being very deliberate and analyzing, because we do have competing rights, and the Supreme Court has upheld the right of individuals to own and carry and have firearms as guaranteed by our Constitution.
Right.
And the Constitution is a document that has existed for over 200 years, and it is supposed to have the framework and the resiliency so it doesn't get changed or affected frivolously. We have laws that come on the books and go off the books. I read somewhere that there's some 10,000 laws already on the books that have some degree of regulation about firearms and firearm ownership and that sort of thing. The tragedy of the young woman who apparently shot her child and then committed suicide.
Right.
The paper said this morning that the weapon that was used in that, and they gave an emphasis handgun, as if that was some indictment. The handgun belonged to a relative who was in law enforcement. A gun is a tool.
I didn't read that.
People misuse tools, and so it's going to be something that is going to be, I think, quite frankly, the issues facing the country that we are now facing another, what do we do with the deficit by March and those things.
Yeah.
I would hate to see the momentum that came about from the avoiding the so-called fiscal cliff. I would hate to see the finishing of the job necessary to hopefully get our economy on a sound footing was distracted by over-politicalization of this issue concerning guns in society, although no question it was a horrific thing that happened. I've heard on the commentators, though, that before the Fair School Safety Act was passed, which decreed that no one could have a firearm on a school campus, there had never been a mass homicide on a school campus in this country until they passed that law.
That's why you're a good attorney, because you will bring stuff like that.
And and also the theater in Aurora, California, where the Batman movie was playing, was one of 4 multiplex theaters, all within a 1 mile to a 1.5 mile radius, and it was the only one of the 4 theaters that had a big sign advertising that it was a gun-free zone, so that no one could carry a weapon there. All the others allowed, lawfully armed, responsible, good guy citizens who had done the things that government required to be properly licensed and permitted and so forth, to go ahead and to exercise their constitutional rights. But this one, so I don't know whether that has anything to do with it or not. I read an article on the internet where school administrators and teachers in Israel are traditionally armed, because everybody in Israel has to go through military service and handgun training, and that's a factor of life, and they've never had a mass homicide in any school in Israel. And I know there's strong feelings. I don't want to invite any political comments. These are not those kind of questions, but they are involved with laws and fundamental rights, and that's something that we've talked about. And I personally have strong feelings in the right of the individual who is the law-abiding citizen not to be relegated to a second-class citizen or have those rights eviscerated because bad people do bad things, and the choice of the tool to perpetrate the horrible act should not be, taken away. We have drunk drivers drive automobiles and kill people. We don't outlaw automobiles. We had Timothy McVeigh rent a rental van and load it up with fertilizer and kerosene and park it in front of the federal courthouse in Kansas City and blow up and destroy 3/4 of the building and kill hundreds of people with a homemade fertilizer bomb. We don't outlaw fertilizer. It takes a measured debate, and I hope that our elected officials will do that, and will take the time to do that and weigh all of the options and the repercussions.
Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, I'm kind of reluctant to bring this up because I know it's not the direction you want to go, but she is now campaigning for more gun control. She's a great person to do that, considering that she survived an act of violence by somebody with a gun. Right. All right, you want to take some phone calls?
Sure,
All right. That's why John is here, to take some phone calls. Good morning. You're on there with John Fuller.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning. How are you, sir? It's always a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Hope you're having a good week.
Yeah, I'm getting over a cold, so I've everything.
Oh, man. Good luck to you in doing that. Everybody's either getting it or getting over it, it seems
Well,
like.
I lucked out because I got all the way through New Year's, and the next day it came.
Too much partying, huh?
I don't know what it was. I believe that federal building was in Oklahoma City.
You're right.
Yeah.
I misspoke.
A quick question here. If you have a client and he's traveling to a foreign country and he gets involved in a situation where he needs to be represented by a lawyer, would that be something that you would handle, or do you referral at that point, or
I would definitely. Anyone who has a legal issue in a jurisdiction other than principally the state of Florida, I think they should have local lawyers. Even in this country, all states have different laws. Each state has its own individual laws, and I always, even when I handle a case out of state, I always associate with a very competent lawyer or law firm in that jurisdiction. And if you're going to appear in the courts of another state, you have to have a local lawyer who will co-sign as local counsel with you And it just makes sense because you can't possibly know the nuances of all the laws of 50 states. Now, your specific question was about a foreign country, and
right.
that's even more critical because their whole cultures, our system of justice in most all of the states are based upon English common law, so there's a commonality that runs through it. The one state that's a little bit different is Louisiana, and their laws are derived from the Napoleonic Code. But when you're talking in other countries, other than England, of course, you are talking about vastly different legal systems, and under no circumstances do I think or most likely I think other lawyers, unless they specifically had trained and had a practice in another country. Also, the language is a very important issue. I have a very good friend of mine who is a fine lawyer in South Florida, and he speaks 4 or 5 languages very fluently, and he does a multinational practice geared primarily to the South America, Central America, and that area has a lot of clients in those areas dealing in commercial business litigation, that sort of thing. And he's very good at it, and he's very knowledgeable, and he is completely fluent. And you know, there are people who can do that, but you know, there's certainly, I think, if that's something that you have a question, you need to look at one of the big cities where they have a very large law firm that has multinational offices. For instance, Holland and Knight, probably the biggest law firm in America, based in Tampa, Florida. They have multiple offices throughout Europe and Asia. So that's what I'd recommend.
Could you, like, would it help to maybe like go to your ambassador in a foreign country and get advice from them?
I honestly don't know how much legal advice the State Department would be able to give, and it depends on what the issue is. If an American citizen is being detained, it would appear to me to be reasonably prudent to involve the State Department to address the diplomatic front on that, in addition to having a local lawyer address the legal issues. But that's not an issue that frequently comes up in a city the size of Ocala, located in the center part of the state of Florida. So I wouldn't be able to make any further comment than what I've just made.
Although I know ourselves, we have many friends and business acquaintances that are traveling all over the world, and there's so many spots that you got to be so careful in that you just you got to be very careful what you do, and you don't want to get in any problems, because if you're over there and you get a problem, you're going to have a problem. And so
I agree with you.
Maybe it's just best to stay home right now.
I think that's a good observation.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Always a pleasure to hear from you.
You bet. Bye now.
And in reverse, do they have the same problems if they're over here and they break the law?
I think so. I think, one of the things that they passed a law in Florida about 12, 14 years ago, that if you are living in this country as a legal alien, in other words, you're properly registered and you are here, you're not a citizen, but you're here properly as a non-resident alien, and you are charged with a criminal offense, even DUI, or it's not that that's trivial, but any criminal offense, and you are convicted of it. The judge, when he or she sentences you, excuse me, not only do they sentence you to whatever punishment you may have as a result if you're found guilty or plead guilty, but they have to notice immigration authorities, and being convicted of a criminal offense is grounds for deportation. I would and they advise you of that, yes.
We do have another phone call. Good morning. You're on the air with John.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. I have a question about trees. Everybody in my area has big trees. Suppose a tree on my property, a branch falls off and hits a neighbor's fence and crushes it, or falls on his house. What's my liability?
Okay. Here's the answer to that. If the tree is located on your property and it appears to be healthy, The branches are not dead. It does not appear to be decayed. It does not appear to be dying with dead leaves or anything. It appears to be a perfectly healthy, fine tree, and a branch falls or the tree blows over in a storm or whatever, even though it's on your property and it falls on an adjacent property owner's property and causes damage, you are not legally liable for the repair of that damage. The person whose house or car or whatever fence was damaged is responsible for repairing the damage that was caused by the tree on your property, provided a reasonable person would have no knowledge to believe that the tree was diseased or defective. Now, the opposite of that, if the tree's been struck by lightning and it's dying, or it has a bunch of dead branches, or the leaves have all turned brown, and there's you see there's dry rot going on in the tree, or you know or should have known as a reasonably prudent person that the tree was diseased, and then a limb falls off or the tree blows over, then you are legally liable.
Boy, I wish my neighbors were listening.
Well, that's a question that comes up fairly often. I've had it on this program more than once. I've had it in the office more than once, and that's the answer to it.
Well, thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for a very good question, and thank you for taking the time to call.
Thank you. If you'd like to call John, I thought somebody's on the other line. The number here is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 622-9622. I had that exact same scenario. The people who live next door rent the property, so it's the owner of the property that's really responsible. And getting a hold of them, who knows where they are? So
yeah. That's the remedy remains the same. The application of the remedy can be complicated.
Do you ever have somebody ask you to write a letter on their behalf, and with the theory that a letter coming from an attorney will hold more weight or be more effective?
Well, I think it depends on the case. If I'm representing the person and they are my clients, and there's an issue, a conflict, a controversy about something, I always begin with a letter to the other side or to the other side's attorney if I know they have an attorney, and address the issue, suggest a possible resolution, or at least invite a discussion or dialogue as to how it can be resolved and settled in a mutually acceptable fashion without litigation. So yes, you do that. I stay away from anyone who wants to come in and they don't want to hire me to advise them or represent them. They just say, I'm mad at my neighbor, and this is what I want to tell him, but I want you to write this down for me and put it on your letterhead and send it because it will intimidate them because you're a lawyer. I don't do that, and I don't think many lawyers do that.
And I guess the question came from my thought that I should have an attorney write a letter to the owner of the property next door.
Absolutely. If you've got a problem and you go to that lawyer for advice, or you're concerned about something and he undertakes to represent you and advise you, and he writes the letter, I think that's entirely appropriate. Maybe I misperceived your question, but it's like, would you let someone come in and ask you to be
write a letter.
to be a scrivener, where you're basically taking dictation and putting it on your letterhead and sending it off?
Yeah, well.
And I also am very reluctant, and I think all good lawyers are this. It is not wise or prudent or helpful to any client to write threatening letters, threatening some kind of legal recourse, unless you are fully prepared and committed to go forward and pursue that. It just is. It's a bluff. It shouldn't be done.
Don't bluff.
If you have a legal remedy and you ask them to resolve the problem without resorting to legal process, I think that's the first thing that you ought to do to minimize costs, to try to expedite the conclusion of it, even if it involves some element of compromise. half a piece of loaf is oftentimes better than rolling the dice, either the whole loaf or no loaf. And so I recommend that. But people who say, I want you to write them a letter and tell them if they don't do X, now if you've written the letter and they haven't done anything and so forth and so on, then you can escalate it appropriately and tell them that if they don't respond or provide some measure of relief within a date and time certain, then you'll have no alternative but to seek your legal remedy. That's fine.
Changing the topic a little bit and basically looking to be educated. What does it mean when somebody is bonded? And I don't mean bonded out of jail. I mean, like, let's say you wanted to.
Okay, I know what you mean.
Okay,
a bond is like an
then?
insurance policy. If you work at a bank, if you have a contracting, we talked about like the roofing contractor or something, or the tree trimmer who says they're licensed and bonded.
Yeah,
a
what does
bond
that
in
mean?
that case is just that they're insured to provide protection to their customers or people who do business with them in the event they commit some negligent act or some unlawful act or something like that.
Okay.
Banks require that people working for banks be bonded so that if a teller decides they're going to empty out the cash drawer at night and leave the country, the bank has an insurance company that has bonded that person against theft. Much different than a bail bond, which is pretrial release in a criminal case. But it's essentially an insurance policy.
Okay, so the commonality in the two uses of the word are they're both money that'll be paid by somebody else in the event that somebody.
Yes, right. The bondsman charges a premium for the exposure or risk that the bonding company accepts as a part of the contract. If they say, we will post a bond for John Doe who's working at a bank, that if John Doe steals money from the bank or any business that has a bonded employee, then, for paying a premium to us, we will repay the business or the bank or whatever the amount of money that has been wrongfully taken. A bail bondsman in a criminal case, you have pretrial release where the court sets bail. Bail is an amount of money, usually, that if a person charged with an offense and incarcerated posts that bail, they can pay cash into the registry of the court, and it just sits there until the case is over and they have faithfully fulfilled their obligations of showing up at every appointed time, and the case goes through and it's concluded, and at the end of the case, whether they're found guilty or innocent or whatnot, they get that money back. They don't get any interest on that money, but they have to take the cash money, and they have to take the full amount of the cash. A bail bondsman is, again, like the insurance guy. He's a licensed professional, and he has the ability to write an insurance policy for you is called a bond that says that I am going to guarantee that if John Doe doesn't show up for trial, then I will pay the amount of his pretrial release bail. The difference is that bail bondsmen, like insurance companies, they charge a premium. The premium is usually 10% of the bond. So if your bail is set at $10,000, it's entirely possible that a lot of folks would not have $10,000 cash laying around to go put in the registry of the court,
Right.
but they would have $1,000. And so they pay the bail bondsman the $1,000. Now, at the end of the case, if a person's shown up and done everything they're supposed to do, they don't get that $1,000 back. That's just like, if you pay for your homeowner's insurance and you didn't have a storm that blew your roof off, you call up your friendly insurance agent and say, hey, another year's gone by, I didn't have a claim, can I have my premium back? They don't do that.
So can I tell you why I'm asking?
Sure.
I'm asking because, my mom passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Larry. I didn't know that.
Well, thank you. That was a couple months ago. So now we're in the process of trying to sell her house. I'm named representative in the will. The judge in Citrus County has told the attorney that I hired that I need to be bonded, $50,000 bond.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm saying, why? I mean, why do I have to pay money to sell my mom's house? Well, that's just the way they're doing it. It's the way it's explained to me.
Well, the probate law says that the probate judge a personal representative in an estate has what's called a fiduciary duty to all interested parties in the estate. That could be any claims of creditors. It could be any beneficiaries who might inherit
Right.
by will or otherwise. In order to, quote, ensure the faithful and lawful and successful compliance of the personal representative, it is discretionary with the judge to set a bond. If the deceased party had a will, I don't think I have ever seen a will where the person named their personal representative, especially when it is a relative, that they didn't also in that document specifically provide for a waiver of the requirement to post any bond. I assume, tragically, that your mom did not die with a will.
She did have a will.
Well,
and she did have that statement in there.
Well, I don't understand how that happens then, and I think that's something you should have a dialogue with your lawyer about, because if you are named personal representative and the will waives any requirement for you as personal representative to have to post a bond, that is the intent of the testator, and I don't understand why the judge would require that. I'm not a wills and estate lawyer. I've made that disclaimer more than once on this show. But usually the only time I've ever seen the requirement to post a bond was when someone died intestate or without a will, and the person or institution that was, or the person that was appointed had no personal relationship with the decedent. And that is to make sure that they faithfully fulfill their obligations. I have never seen it where it's a relative, especially a close relative, one of the, what is called the first degree of consanguinity, which means you're the first level of blood relationship.
Right.
And I find that highly unusual. I don't know the details. I can't comment on the specifics, but I think you ought to talk with your lawyer and see if there is not some motion that could be filed to relieve you from that obligation, especially if the other interested parties would join in that motion, that they see there is no reason to do that. Because I believe, and I could be wrong on this, because again, this is out of my area of expertise, that the cost of the bond for the personal representative is an expense of the administration of the estate. So, so why would you want to waste money doing that? And $50,000 sounds like a substantial amount of money to me. Of course, it depends on the size of the estate, but that's very unusual. I will say that I have not heard that happening. I've heard of personal representative bonds being set, and the amount that it is set is based upon the value of the estate and the judge's perception of what is the risk that the personal representative may fail to faithfully complete his or her legal obligations to marshal the assets, see that the last indebtedness are paid, taxes paid, or get a non-tax certificate, and that the assets are distributed to the beneficiaries or interested parties in compliance with the will. I would definitely talk to your lawyer about that.
Thank you, John. That's what I thought. I thought the same way.
Well, in my career, it's not the first time I've disagreed with a judge. Most times I've been successful, but there's certainly times when my disagreement with what the judge's interpretation was different. That's what we have appellate courts for.
Yeah. John, how do we get a hold of you if we...
Okay, we have an office here in Ocala. The number in Ocala is 352-547-4292. We also have an office in the Villages where my wife and partner Janet is today seeing a number of Social Security disability clients. That has a toll-free number, 855-534 2565. If you have a legal issue in personal injury, commercial business litigation, complex family law matters, or Social Security disability, those are the areas that we focus on, and we'd be happy to talk with you, see if we could help you.
And I love when you demonstrate why you are the one people go to. You're very good at it. John, thank you.
My pleasure, Larry.
Very
Thank
good.
you for a good show.
We'll take a little break. Dr. Riyad Fakhoury is up next.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala. The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Life jackets save lives. Wear it, Florida. It'll turn out partly sunny and unseasonably warm today. There can be a shower in spots near the coast. The high this afternoon, 79 to 83. Partly cloudy and mild tonight, though 63 to 67. Partly sunny and warm tomorrow, the high 78 to 82. For Friday, partly sunny and remaining warm. There may be a shower along the coast, the high 78 to 82. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
ABC News Now. I'm Karen Chase. 57 people were injured, one critically, when a commuter ferry boat crashed into a New York City dock. Witnesses say the impact felt like a car accident. The captain then announced call 911. A corner of the boat, that originated in New Jersey, ripped open like a tin can. This year's flu epidemic has even made the healthcare system sick. Some hospitals have set up triage tents in parking lots to handle the onslaught. 8 hospitals in Chicago were so overwhelmed they stopped taking flu patients. Gun control is topic 1 at the White House, where Vice President Joe Biden holds the first in a series of meetings with representatives on all sides. Today, he talks with victims advocates and gun safety experts. Tomorrow, he meets with NRA reps and gun enthusiasts. Saying it's what Jesus would do, the National Cathedral in Washington will soon start hosting same-sex marriages. ESPN is apologizing for sportscaster Brent Musburger's over-the-top on-air compliments to one of the quarterback's girlfriends during the BCS title game. They say his comments went too far. This is ABC News. Jay.
Companies are the same? Well, they're not. And here's why. SafeLight offers all-day Saturday service. So we're there when you need us, even on the weekends. Because you can't predict when you'll need a repair or a replacement. Plus, our work is backed by the only national lifetime guarantee.
Just tell your insurance company you want SafeLight or call 1-800-800-2727 or go to safelight.com.
SafeLight Repair, SafeLight Replace.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.